The Alpha King refused every Luna for years, until a poor Omega walked into his frozen palace. The Frostmoor Palace stood at the edge of the northern mountains, its towers carved from pale stone that seemed to hold winter inside it all year long. Snow rested on its rooftops even in summer, and travelers said the whole palace felt like a place where warmth had simply given up trying. For 9 years, the pack had watched their king grow colder with each passing season, until most people stopped expecting anything different from him at all. King Ronan Ashfell was young when he took the throne, but he ruled like a man twice his age. He was fair, he was firm, he kept his pack safe and his borders strong. But he had not looked at a woman with anything close to warmth since he was 21 years old, and everyone in Frostmoor Pack knew why, even if no one dared speak of it in his presence. Long ago, before the crown had settled fully on his shoulders, Ronan had loved someone. Her name was rarely spoken now. She had died before their bond could complete, taken by a sickness that no healer could stop, and something in Ronan had died with her. He built walls after that, not walls of stone, though the palace certainly had enough of those, but walls inside himself, walls that no Luna candidate had ever managed to climb. And there had been many candidates, daughters of nobles, warriors from allied packs, even a princess who arrived with a procession so grand it took an hour just for her carriages to pass through the front gates. Ronan received each of them politely in his ice-carved throne room. He asked polite questions, he listened to polite answers, and within the hour, every single one of them was politely sent home. The pack elders whispered that their king had lost the ability to feel the mate bond entirely, that his wolf had frozen along with his heart. Ronan let them whisper. He had learned, over the years, that silence was easier than explanation. Meera had never once imagined she would set foot inside the Frostmoor Palace. She had been born an Omega, the lowest rank in wolf society, in a small border village where people worked hard and had little to show for it. She had spent her whole life being overlooked. She was not strong enough for pack patrols. She was not wealthy enough to matter in village gatherings. She had grown used to being invisible, and in a strange way, she had made peace with it. Invisible people, she told herself, at least were safe from disappointment. She came to the palace only because her grandmother had fallen ill, and the medicine that could help her cost more than Meera's family could ever save. A traveling merchant mentioned that the palace kitchen sometimes hired extra hands for the winter season, offering food, coin, and medicine in exchange for labor. Meera did not think twice. She packed a small bag, kissed her grandmother's forehead, and walked 3 days through the cold to reach the palace gates. She was assigned to the kitchens immediately, given a small room to share with 2 other servant girls, and told firmly by the head cook that she was to be seen and not heard, especially not near the king. Meera nodded and accepted this without complaint. She expected to scrub floors, wash dishes, and carry firewood for a full season, and then return home with enough to save her grandmother. She did not expect anything more, and she certainly did not expect to matter to anyone within those frozen walls. For the first few weeks, everything went exactly as she imagined. She woke before dawn, worked until her hands ached, and fell asleep the moment her head touched her thin pillow. She rarely saw anyone above her station, and she preferred it that way. Kings, she had learned early in life, were not meant to notice girls like her. Then came the morning everything changed. Meera was carrying a heavy basket of clean linens down the servants' stairwell, a narrow passage that connected the kitchens to the upper halls. The stone steps were slick that day, covered in a thin layer of ice that had crept in through a cracked window nobody had bothered to fix. She was hurrying, worried about the time, when her foot slipped out from under her. She dropped the basket. Linens scattered across the steps in a soft white cascade, and Meera herself would have fallen hard against the stone if a strong hand had not caught her wrist at the very last second. She looked up, breathless, expecting to see one of the guards, or perhaps the steward. Instead, she found herself staring into the pale grey eyes of King Ronan Ashfell himself. For a moment, neither of them moved. Meera felt something strange pass through the air between them, a kind of pull she had never felt before, gentle but undeniable, like a string tugging quietly at her chest. She saw the king's eyes widen slightly, just for an instant, before his expression smoothed back into its usual calm. He released her wrist as soon as she had steadied herself. He said nothing about what had just happened. He simply glanced at the scattered linens, told her to be more careful on the icy steps, and continued on his way, as though nothing unusual had occurred at all. Meera stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding for reasons she could not explain, before gathering the linens and hurrying back to her duties. She told herself it was nothing. Kings did not notice kitchen girls. Whatever she had felt in that instant was surely just surprise, or embarrassment, or the cold air playing tricks on her senses. But Ronan had felt it too, and he could not explain it away so easily. That single pulse in his chest, the moment his hand had closed around her wrist, was something he had not felt in 9 long years. It was the mate bond, unmistakable and undeniable, the very thing he had convinced himself he would never feel again. He walked the rest of the way to his study in a daze, his mind replaying the moment over and over, searching for some other explanation, and finding none that satisfied him. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself that after everything he had lost, he could not risk feeling that pull again, only to have it taken from him a second time. But over the following days, he found himself thinking of the servant girl more than he wanted to admit. He asked the household steward, in what he hoped sounded like idle curiosity, about the new kitchen worker who had been on the servants' stairwell that morning. The steward, sensing nothing unusual in the question, simply told him her name was Meera Voss, that she had come from a border village to earn medicine money for her ailing grandmother, and that she was known among the staff for working harder than anyone else without ever complaining. Ronan found himself walking past the kitchens more often after that. He told himself each time that he was checking on the household budget, or inspecting the storerooms, or any number of small excuses that grew thinner with each repetition. In truth, he simply wanted to see her. He watched her from a distance at first. She scrubbed pots until her knuckles turned red. She carried firewood twice her size, without a word of protest. She shared her own bread with an older servant woman who had gone without breakfast one particularly hard morning. She was kind in a quiet, unshowy way, the kind of kindness that expected nothing in return. Slowly, the frozen thing in Ronan's chest began to thaw, whether he wanted it to or not. One afternoon, unable to stop himself any longer, he entered the kitchen directly and asked for her by name. The other servants froze in surprise, unsure what to make of their king standing among the pots and ovens, but Meera simply set down what she was holding and answered him plainly. "Yes, your majesty?" He asked her, somewhat awkwardly for a man used to commanding armies, how she was finding her work at the palace. It was a simple question, almost foolish in its plainness, but Meera answered it honestly. She said the work was hard but fair, that the kitchen staff had been kind to her, and that she was grateful for the chance to earn enough to help her grandmother. She did not flatter him. She did not try to impress him. She simply answered the question she had been asked, the way anyone might answer a stranger who had shown a moment of polite interest. That honesty, more than anything else, was what undid him completely. Every Luna candidate who had ever stood before him in his throne room had come with practiced words and careful smiles, each one hoping to win his favor, his crown, his kingdom. Meera had no such hopes. She did not even know, in that moment, that the pull she had felt on the stairwell meant anything at all. She was simply a tired kitchen worker answering her king's question, wanting nothing more than to return to her chores. Ronan left the kitchen that day more shaken than he had been in years. He did not act immediately. A part of him, the part still guarded by 9 years of careful walls, warned him that feeling this pull did not mean he was ready to open himself to it again. He had loved once before, and the pain of losing that love had nearly broken him. He was not certain he could survive breaking a second time, but he also could not ignore what his wolf had recognized instantly, even if his mind wanted more time to catch up. Over the following weeks, he found small ways to be near her without revealing the truth of what he felt. He asked after her grandmother's health through the household steward and quietly arranged for proper medicine to be sent to her village, without ever taking credit for the gift. He noticed when her shoes had worn through at the soles and arranged for the household to provide new ones to all the kitchen staff, so that her own new pair would not stand out as special treatment. He was, in his own careful way, trying to care for her without frightening her away. Meera, for her part, began to notice these small changes too, though she could not explain them. She received word that her grandmother's medicine had somehow been paid in full. She received a sturdy new pair of shoes, just when her old ones had begun to fall apart. She told herself these were simply strokes of good fortune, nothing more, though a small part of her wondered. She also noticed that the king seemed to find reasons to pass through the kitchens more often than any king reasonably should, and that his grey eyes lingered on her a moment longer than they lingered on anyone else. She told herself this too meant nothing. She was an Omega from a poor village. Kings did not choose girls like her, no matter what strange feelings passed between them on icy stairwells. It was Ronan, in the end, who found the courage to speak the truth aloud. He summoned her not to the throne room, where the weight of the crown and the coldness of the ice-carved walls might frighten her into silence, but to a small private study, where a fire burned warmly in the hearth. When she arrived, unsure why she had been called, he did not waste time with careful diplomacy. He told her plainly what he had felt on the stairwell that day, the pulse of recognition that had shaken him to his core. He told her about the mate he had lost 9 years before, about the walls he had built since then, about the reason every Luna candidate before her had left his throne room within the hour. None of them, he said quietly, had been her. Meera listened in stunned silence, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. She had spent her whole life being told, in ways large and small, that she did not matter, that girls like her were meant to remain invisible, while the important people made important choices around them. She was not ready to believe, without hesitation, that a king's wolf had chosen her over princesses and warriors and noble daughters from powerful packs. She told him this honestly, without anger, simply stating what years of being overlooked had taught her to expect from the world. Ronan did not argue with her. He simply told her that he understood her doubt, and that he did not expect her to trust his words immediately. He asked only for the chance to prove them true, not through grand gestures or royal promises, but through patience, through time, through the same honesty she had shown him without even realizing it. And so, slowly, over the weeks that followed, he did exactly that. He did not offer her a crown first. He offered her conversations in the quiet evenings, questions about her village and her grandmother and the small dreams she had once allowed herself, before life had taught her to expect less. He offered her the truth of his grief, spoken aloud for the first time in 9 years. He offered her patience, never once pushing her toward feelings she was not ready to name. Meera found herself, despite every instinct telling her to remain cautious, slowly opening the walls she had built around her own heart. She found that the king who had seemed so cold to the rest of the pack was, in quiet moments, gentle and thoughtful in ways she had never expected. She found that his loneliness matched her own in a way she had not known she was searching for. When Ronan finally knelt before the assembled pack to present her as his chosen Luna, the elders who had spent 9 years whispering about their frozen king fell silent, not from disapproval, but from something closer to wonder. She stood before them in a simple dress, poor and Omega, and utterly unlike anyone Frostmoor pack had ever crowned before, and yet none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was the warmth in the king's eyes, warmth that had been absent for nearly a decade, now finally, unmistakably returned. The people of Frostmoor pack said, in the weeks that followed, that the palace itself seemed to grow warmer. Perhaps it was only their imagination. Perhaps the frozen stone truly did hold some memory of the joy that had returned within its walls. Either way, no one doubted any longer that their king had found what he had spent 9 long years refusing to look for, and that he had found it in the last place anyone expected, in the quiet kindness of a poor Omega girl who had only ever wanted to help her grandmother, and who had walked, without knowing it, straight into the heart of a king who had almost forgotten how to feel at all.